Okay, Thomas. Cyber debate is wondering what's his gentleman's definition of being normal.
Being normal,
Yeah,
having well, really saying what's my definition of what is not a psychopath.
yeah,
Having compassion and empathy, having able to put yourself in the place of another person when they're going through suffering, able to empathize for somebody who's going through a crisis in their life, and that's a normal person. A normal person feels guilt when they've hurt somebody. A normal person feels guilt when they've done something bad and they try to make amends for that. A psychopath doesn't. They just don't care. So that's a normal person. Empathy, that to me would actually define a human being more than anything else.
yeah.
Empathy for another person.
Okay, that's a good answer. And a question here from Alan. He's saying, Thomas, do the establishment, or what Alan likes to call the powers that were, deliberately look out for psychos to work for them as politicians and minions and so forth?
The powers that were, I love that.
Yeah.
Well done, Alan. Yes, they do. What they do is they will look for psychopaths. They will call them things like future leaders in society. In fact, if you look at some of the documents of the Tavistock Institute back in the 1920s, and it also through places like the London School of Economics, they'll actually talk about finding people who have the right pedigree or the right drive, and they call them future leaders. The whole common purpose movement in England is all about that, identifying future leaders. And if you look at the types of people they're looking for psychopaths.
Yeah, we actually did talk about the common purpose there. What was it? No, it wasn't last week, was it? Possibly the week before. So yeah, that's interesting stuff, and I urge people to look more into that, into common purpose. Another one from Cyber Debate. UK psychopaths couldn't even handle sex-related stress, let alone pressure of politics. I think I said that. That's more of a comment than a question. But I don't know if you want to comment on that.
Yeah. What they do, they're fearless. This is why they can pass lie detector tests. This is why they can literally kill somebody behind the door and walk in front of a TV camera after they've cleaned their clothes off and act like nothing's happened. They're perfect for politics. They don't have stress. This is one of the things. If you hook up, if you test their blood pressure during the most intense situations, it doesn't change. That's another thing. They all have low blood pressure as well.
Well, jeez, I'll never be a psychopath, so I've got bloody high blood pressure. Ram Baros, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, RAAM on the chat box here. He said, if people are not psychopathic, will it be difficult for them, or even possible for them, to reach the top of their profession without psychopaths bullying them out?
Yes, here's how they reach it. That's a very good question. Ram called in. Yeah, they can, and here's how they do it. If psychopaths have no creativity and no talent, they don't have. If they're musicians, if they're artists, if they're poets, if they're writers, they have no creativity. What they are is they're plagiarizers, and they mimic other people. So if you're a creative person, and this is not just creative in the artistic sense, this can be creative in the business sense, in the political sense. It's probably more difficult that way. But if you're a creative person with original ideas, and just by your creativity alone will get you to the top. And I can say there's numerous examples of that. I've known people all my life who, like, they just had that creative spark in them. That's a way a non-psychopathic person can get to the top. Another way, unfortunately, is what I call a proto-psychopath, who's a person who's not a psychopath, but they learn to do what the psychopaths want from them. What Stalin called useful idiots. And these are very dangerous and very frightening people, because there's a very strong S&M trait, sadomasochistic trait in their pathology. Even though they're not psychopaths, they worship those they deem above them as authority figures, yet they despise those below them. And if you see, like, when we had tyrannical regimes, and indeed, non-tyrannical regimes, you get these sort of middlemen who are just like quislings, who will do exactly what the psychopaths will tell them to do. The classic thing, we always remember the story of the Holocaust and the Nuremberg trials. They were saying to the Nazis, some of the Nazis who did this, they had perfectly normal lives. And they said, why did you do it? And they would just say, I was just following orders. And that's another way non-psychopaths get. There's a very tremendous book from the 60s by Dr. Stanley Milgram called Obedience to Authority, where he shows that normal people, if they just are prone to being ordered around by authority figures will behave like psychopaths. He did a famous experiment where he told the subjects that there was a person on the other side of the wall, and each time they increased the electric voltage, it would start to shock the person more and more. And something like 60% of the volunteers willingly, they didn't really kill a man on the other side. It was an actor pretending to die, but they increased the electric shocks. So in many ways, until the man was dead, just because the authority figure told them to, in this case a man in a white coat, which just is very frightening when we talk about like society, when you see where people who are not psychopaths, a good percentage of them will just do anything an authority figure will tell them to do if they're a psychopath. If the authority figure tells them to do it, and they will actually behave like a psychopath. It's almost like they're in a mind control trance.
So what you're saying is the morals don't kick in at all. They're not going to question it. They'll just do what they're told.
Yeah, and these are the people we should be most afraid of in many ways, because if there ever was a breakdown in society, the ones we fear the most would be the ones who would be taking the orders willingly by their authority figures. Some of them may be normal people in normal situations who don't mean any harm or danger, but under periods of crisis, if an authority figure says to them, do this, they'll do anything.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing like that could be your local friendly policeman.
Or just the local neighbour who's like, who does everything the TV tells him, can't think for himself. There's a moment of crisis and somebody says, oh, that guy over there has food, or that woman over there has something, and they'll be the first one to come knocking down the door with a hatchet, you know?
Yeah. Question from Eric. Can someone be a little bit psychopathic?
Yes, there are definitely frequencies of pathology, and that's interesting. Like, one of the things, my whole idea of approaching psychopaths is as soon as you recognize one, just get away from them. You know, don't use violence, don't go after them. You'll never beat them in a mind game. But as soon as you realize that one is a psychopath, you just make a run for it and you make sure nothing to do with them ever again. However, I do believe there are psychopaths out there. Every psychopath knows they're a psychopath, but there are psychopaths out there who are aware of their pathology and they keep it under control just because they want to get along. It's not because they care. It's not because they're doing it for altruistic or they want to be part of society. They just don't need the grief. So they're generally the less intelligent psychopaths. Yeah, it seems to be related somehow with intelligence. Yeah, some people can be a bit psychopathic and be psychopaths, you know, but a psychopath who's even a little bit psychopathic is extremely more dangerous than someone who's not a psychopath.
Okie dokie. This is a strange one. I'm just gonna throw this one at you. It's there's a few comments going on there on the chat box in relation to The Simpsons. Now, I mean, I know TV is kind of chewing for the mind and it programs us and all this sort of stuff, but they're just saying that the likes of what's his name, Smithers on The Simpsons. He seems like he just takes orders. And what was it? Release the hounds, Smithers, and Smithers will release the hounds.
Yeah,
but yeah, he seems like a normal guy.
Smithers would be a proto-psychopath, where Burns is a psychopath.
Yeah.
But even Homer has psychopathic traits. You know, his selfishness, like a lot of psychopaths that, you know, I don't want to get the impression that all psychopaths are hotshots and winners. But the vast majority of psychopaths are wastrels and dossers who just live off other people's labours and just collect a paycheck or just like live off another person who's working. So Homer even has aspects of the pathology in his behaviour too.
Just talking about that, one of the things I've been looking at in psychology is the definition in relationships about givers and takers, because a giver will actually use more energy and a taker will use less energy, and there's different percentages of this. You'll never get, very very hard to get 50-50. You might get 90-10,